Okay, this is part 2 of your second week, Virginia or Southern Colonies. And let's do a couple multiple choice questions. You don't have to write any of this down or turn any of this in, but just to see how you're doing. So natives tell stories in which formation? All right, it's D, circles. Hopefully you got that. In native households, which one is true? It's actually C. So I hope you didn't say men are the primary farmers or the fathers in charge, because that is not true. And Baradash's third gender were accepted in native culture. So yes, girls can sleep with whom they want as long as it's not on the mother's side of the family. Remember, the mother's side is considered their true family. Okay, so again, going to our thesis, the Virginian or Southern colonies developed a culture based largely on the solutions to its initial problems. So last time we talked about the problems. Today we're going to do the solutions. So just as a reminder about the problems, try to remember if you can. And yeah, we talked about ignorance, that they were second sons and criminals. They were right next to the water, so that created malaria, and they didn't know how to farm, didn't want to farm. They had a problem with the communal system where again, they're selfish, lazy, greedy. So if somebody's working 2 hours versus 8 hours, the person working 8 hours doesn't want to work 8 hours anymore. And remember the guilds in pasture farming, and also the Spanish myth where they remembered about Cortez and Pizarro. They heard those stories about being thought of as gods, and so they wanted that. So that is why so many people were dying, so many people were not doing well. All right, so let's talk about the solutions. And what I'd like for you to do is just take a minute and think, if you were in charge of this community, you know it's doing really poorly, what would you do to solve the problems? Just take a minute and write down a couple of things. Again, remember, writing these down will help you later. Okay, let me go ahead with some of the solutions. So the first solution was that they needed what was called a cash crop, C-A-S-H, cash crop. They needed something to sell to England in order to get what they wanted. And you don't need to write this down, but just take a look at how quickly things, progress with tobacco. Tobacco is very easy to grow. Of course, they needed native land for it, but by 1611, they had the first tobacco crop. The date I want you to notice is 1640. Notice how many pounds, 3 million pounds are shipped out. 1640. What's going to happen at that point? Remember, I keep on saying there was not slavery at first, but by 1640, African Americans are going to start losing their rights, and we are going to start definitely having slavery. And I think it relates to tobacco. So this is an English smoking club. The king in England did not like that everybody was so addicted to tobacco. And you can see the smoking club. You can see, this guy in the corner, throwing up, and it's just not the best place. I'm going to play you a song on the next one. Again, these recordings don't go so well, so I'm hoping it does. If not, you can look up tobacco song, Virginia tobacco song on YouTube and hear this, but take a look. You can at least see the lyrics. I'm going to play a couple of stanzas. Oops, no, that didn't work. Hold on, sorry. There we go.
Tobacco is but an Indian weed, grows green in the morn, cut down at eve. It shows our decay, we're all made of clay. Think of this when you smoke tobacco. The pipe that is so lily white, wherein so many take delight, is broke with a touch. Man's life is but such. Think of this when you smoke tobacco. The pipe that is so foul within shows how man's soul is stained with sin. It does require to be purged by the fire. Think of this when you smoke tobacco.
Okay, so hopefully you guys could hear that. I know the sound is probably pretty bad, but as you can tell, in England, the king, whatever, did not really like the people who were so addicted to tobacco, but as you know, it stayed very popular. But that is one of the solutions to Virginia problems. Okay, the big one that we're going to be talking about mostly today is indentured servants. There's going to be some primary sources that you'll be doing with this. So first thing is, let me tell you what an indentured servant is. So an indentured servant is one of those landless poor that we talked about before that could not afford to come over to America. So what they would do is agree to work 4 to 7 years, depending on the colony. Every colony had different, contracts. In exchange for ship passage, so in exchange for their passage on the ship. Now you can see we're going to do recruitment in just a minute, as you can see, but take a look at this advertising. So what they're saying is that you're going to have all this land and things are going to be wonderful if you just come over. So let's talk about recruitment for a minute, and I'll be asking about this stuff later. You can incorporate it with your primary source explanations, but they had what were called spirits, S-P-I-R-I-T-S, spirits, who were in charge of filling boats with these indentured servants. And the spirits weren't exactly the most honest people. They might say, oh, you're going to be best friends with nobles and, gentlemen and lords and whatever. Or what they might do is, let's say you're out drinking with your friends might sell you and you're on your way to America the next morning as you wake up. They also offered kids, candy. I mean, it was pretty bad. So yeah, they were in charge of filling these ships. So that's recruitment. The crossing. So what I want you to do is think now about what some of the dangers would be if you're crossing, and there's a whole lot. And then what I want you to do is to go to the primary source, Gottlieb Mittelberger. It's called Packed Densely Like Herrings. Please go to the readings, find this primary source, list 2 quotes with analysis of, what would be some of the dangers. What did Gottlieb Mittelberger face? All right, so let me just tell you a couple of things too that are not from the primary source, but and so don't write these down as your answer, but take them as notes. So the winds could be too feeble or they could be too violent. You could have pirates, shipwrecks, hostile crews, sickness. Passengers are packed into holds, not enough ventilation. Rations meant to last 14 weeks, but in summer could deteriorate. One boat, the Love and Unity, again, you don't have to write every detail down, left Rotterdam with 150 people. 1 year later, remember it's only supposed to last 14 weeks on the trip, they landed with 34. Water and rats are being sold. Chests of the dead were broken into by captain and crew. The Seaflower left Belfast with 106 in 1741, only at sea for 16 weeks, but lost 46 passengers from starvation. 6 had been cannibalized. Now, every colony could do what they wanted, but Georgia was smart, and they put on board turnips, carrots, potatoes, and onions. Out of 1,500 passengers in 1 year, they only lost 6. So if you just put on some onions and some turnips, they could have stopped a lot of this. Okay, the next one is the contract. This one's a little bit shorter. And what would happen is you would sign a contract when you got to America. The master would look at you and say, again, it's not slavery, you're not owned by him, but they would have you sign this. A lot of people, of course, could not read what they were signing, but usually, again, it was 4 to 7 years you would work, and then you would get like tools and get land, whatever, when you're done. Okay, the next one is seasoning. This one is also kind of shorter, but seasoning means that you lived for 1 full year in Virginia. Things were really bad in Virginia, and what I want you to remember is that the average lifespan in Virginia was 40 years old. That's it. So in England, it was 60. In New England in the north, it's going to be 80. So that's a big difference. So seasoning, again, if you lived through 1 year, then, you probably would keep on living because you made it through, all the fevers, malaria, dysentery, which is actually diarrhea. Okay. Next one is sexual restraints, and I'm going to ask you about this later when we talk about women, so please, take a couple of notes. But you were not allowed to be married during your service. So if you got pregnant, you would be accused of, and make sure you take some notes on this, fornication and bastardy. So your child would be considered a bastard because it's the child of an unmarried woman. You would get 21 lashes, plus you would get 1 to 3 additional years of service. Okay, so the problem here is what happens if it's the master that's raped you, which is actually pretty common in Virginia because your father was not around to protect you, believe it or not. In New England, the father's right there. It's very patriarchal. Rape is actually a capital crime. You could die if you rape somebody or accused of raping, whatever. But here, rape is, pretty common. So the master could rape you, then he gets additional 1 to 3 years of service. Well, finally, people realize this is, the master's got way too much power here. So they had an old wives' tale, they call it, like a folk tale from England, where they believed that if women were in labor having their baby, that they would tell the truth. So they would ask the women at that point who was the father. And if it was the master, he would be charged with adultery. She would be removed and resold. Now, a couple more things you need to know is that if the baby was mulatto or mixed, like half African American and half white, then she would get heavy whipping and 7 years of extra service. Now, why is this? Because the original masters, again, it's not slavery yet, didn't like that these white women would be with black guys. And that actually was very common, is that there would be African Americans that would come over. They also were indentured servants. They might get their freedom, and then they attract a indentured servant, white girl, and they go together. So this happens so often that the masters made it a very heavy crime. What happened too a lot of times is they would move to North Carolina and kind of live in the hills. Okay, last point, this will be a lot shorter, is running away. And you would be charged for the amount of days that you were gone. So usually 10 times. So if you ran away 3 days, you'd have to pay back 30 days. Well, this one lady, Anne Arundel, and if you look on a map, you can still see Anne Arundel County, which I just love that. It's in Maryland. She ran off 133 days, different times, lots of short times. So she ended up owing 1,330 days. In South Carolina, they had a lot more African Americans than whites, and there was a big fear of insurrection, of rebellion. So they said every year that you run away, every day you run away, you have to pay back a year. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to go to the primary sources, and I want you to say, what did Richard Freethorn go through as an indentured servant? And I'll list 2 quotes with analysis. Kind of read it carefully. And then Elizabeth Spriggs, what did she go through as an indentured servant? Again, 2 quotes with analysis. Now we're going to talk about what actually happened with slaves, how this worked. There's going to be a number of short questions. They're going to be worth a lot less, like a quarter of a point or whatever, as opposed to a few points per question. So try to, weigh it according to, how much work you have to do. But I do want all these questions answered. So this is a secondary source. I'm going to give you some information. So let me just go through it. 3,000 new settlers arrived in Virginia. When they arrived with a servant, they received 50 additional acres of land. So this was called the headright system. And what would happen is settlers, again, would receive 50 acres of land when they arrived, and another 50 if they brought a servant. So question 4A, what would settlers be encouraged to do with this policy? Okay, based on what happened with 1622. 1640, remember I told you to remember that date. African-American Anthony Johnson and his wife had a small estate. They acquired 5 workers and 250 acres. Some of his workers were white. So again, please pay attention to that. He's African-American. Some of his workers are white. Of 19,000 settlers, 400 were black. 20 African-Americans were free in Northampton County. 13 owned their own homes. So 4B, does anything surprise you? Okay, again, in 1640, 3 servants escaped to Maryland from Virginia. They were captured and tried for breaking their contracts. The 2 whites received additional years of service. The African-American servant was sentenced with serving his natural life. So what happened? And this is actually the first time we see slavery, because what happens with the African-American servant? 1640, again, slavery shifts from non-Christian to non-white. So who's in danger here? It used to be, I'll just make this more clear, that Africans that came over that were Christian, they were not supposed to become enslaved. But what happens in 1640? So answer 4D question. Massachusetts recognized slavery as a legal institution. Connecticut, Maryland, New York, New Jersey. Where are these states located? What's interesting about these states? Also, 1662, a child born of an enslaved mother was now determined to be a slave. So how is slavery becoming stronger? Unless indentured servants were coming to America, many had completed their term of service. So who's in danger? We're getting less, Europeans coming over, even less African Americans that are able to be indentured servants. So who are they going to turn to for workflow? Okay, so now we're going to talk about Virginia women, and I'm going to give you a little lecture. And then what I want you to do is you're going to be kind of summarizing my lecture. Again, I won't be doing a whole lot of this, but the first couple days are super interactive, and so I had to change the format. But normally my class is not, you're going to be looking at documents. It's going to be a little bit more online interactional. Okay, so in 1620 we get our first boatload of women, of free women. So they were not indentured, they were free. And what I want you to imagine is, just think about like the Bachelorette. So she has 25 guys and she's got, one girl. Who has the power? It's the girl, right? So she is deciding, who does she want to be involved in? be involved with. And the guys are kind of at a disadvantage here. So please keep that in mind. When things are unstable, women have more power. Please don't just automatically say that women are inferior, because that is kind of lazy thinking, to be honest. It's more high school thinking. I need you to, pay attention that things are not always how you think they are. So the next point is going to be marriage and childbearing. And after the initial group of, first boatload of free women, there are about 140 actually. Most other women are going to come here as indentured servant, about 80%. So what would happen is she would work until she's like 21, and then she'd be free, and she would marry at around 25 years old. She'd have one child every 2 years. Two would die in childhood. After 7 years, her husband would die, and she would die soon after. So again, I know I went kind of fast, but I know you can take, stop the video. By age 9, half of the children had lost one or both parents. So please don't think it's just your mom, dad, 2 kids. It's not like that at all. It's more like today with a lot of step families. Okay, then our last point on this is that, like I said, if something is stable, it's more patriarchal. Men are more in charge. If it's unstable, then women have more power. So women would control the property until it was given to heirs if they're a widow. So in other places, women did not have that power. If they're New England, they usually, would lose that power. In New England, for example, they only got a third, but in Virginia, they would have the power over it. And women often married up, and they had a lot of power in deciding, what the requirements of their marriage was. For example, Sarah Harrison married James Blair in 1687, and the minister asked her 3 times if she would obey her husband in marriage, and she just said, no obey, I'm not going to do it. So also what you guys need to know is, even though women did have power, society always has a way of kind of taking that back. So in 1662, the House of Burgesses, that's the governing body, said that every county needs to have a ducking stool. And this is for female scandalmongers. So what they would do is, it would be, I don't know if it's called a lever or fulcrum, I forget. Anyways, so what would happen is there'd be a man on the shore. He would pull up on this chair. The woman would be strapped to the chair, and then she would come out of the water, and then he'd let her down into the water. And she would do this all day long until she sputtered an apology, but it could be just all day. So that was not for men, that was just for women. The other thing you need to know about these women is that they did have big mouths, so this probably got them in a lot of trouble. For example, this Mrs. Williams called John Dennis a knave and a base knave, which is basically a fool. He was put in the stocks for calling her a whore and a base whore. Edward Drew sued Joanne Butler for calling his wife a common cunted whore, excuse my language, and Fowler received 20 lashes and had to issue a public apology for saying to a high public official that Captain Thorogood kissed my arse. So that, again, was another reason for the ducking stool. But that was just, again, for women. But again, please don't write your, really kind of as a lazy response of, oh, women were treated like animals, or I hate that, because that's not true at all. They weren't branded and put into pens and fed in troughs. Okay, don't make that very lazy response, or that they were inferior and they needed to just take care of the kids and stuff. I really hate those kind of lazy responses. I need you to pay attention to what we're doing and respond with that, and I'm sure you will. So what you're going to do is, you're going to create a story of a woman who lives in Virginia. Maybe start her off as an indentured servant, and then maybe she sees this boat of people, but you do need to include the indentured servants a bit. So use each of the points mentioned in the lecture, right, about arrival, marriage, and childbearing, too unstable to be patriarchal. Also include the points about sexual restraints under indentured servitude. Okay, and that is it for Virginia solutions. The Virginian or Southern colonies developed a culture based largely on the solutions to its initial problems. Believe it or not, you guys, you're 1/8 done with the class. Next week, you're going to be about 1/5 done. So it goes pretty fast. Anyways, good job, everybody. So think about, what were some of the problems, what were some of the solutions, and how did the solutions to the initial problems help to create Virginia or Southern culture, right? It created a slave culture. It created women that were more powerful. It created the tobacco culture. So think about that a little bit. Okay, thank you very much.